Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia.
Hello, everyone. We are happy to be here on this Wednesday afternoon, almost afternoon for other people, or
Almost.
maybe even like evening for some people,
It
right?
could, it definitely could be, right? Whatever time it is by you, we hope your day is going exactly how you wanted it to go.
Yes,
And if not,
absolutely.
hope hopefully the shifts that you make are making it better.
And hopefully today's talk, right, will get you thinking about something else, right, in ways that you yourself can brighten your day.
I know, and I decided to brighten the day. See my yellow sweater?
I love it. I love it. When Jill came on, it's one thing that I noticed. And I'm like, wow, it's so spring. And I know you being in Minnesota, right? Like,
It's not spring.
yeah, it won't really, Minnesota won't let you all just be great and enter into the spring world.
It's coming. It is coming.
It is coming.
We had one more day of, I'm hoping last day, right? Of like snow, hail, icy rain.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I will take this on in Baltimore and we will check out spring before you and make sure that it's okay.
Thank
Because
you.
this week we're supposed to be in the 70s.
Hence why I have spring inside.
Right. So we're curious, like, where are you watching from? Even if you're on replay, let us know. Where are you watching from and have you entered spring yet?
Yes. And when we think about spring, right, we think about growth,
Hmm.
which is why today we're talking about growth and development programs.
Yeah.
And more specifically, what I love is one size doesn't fit all.
Hmm. It's true. And it's one of the reasons why Catalyst was created, right? Is because we've been through leadership development where, I always think about it as like, oh, this is really good information, right? Like leader, just thinking about leadership principles and how you can be a better leader, right? Like we read the articles, we see it on LinkedIn, it might even come to our inbox, or maybe our organizations invest in something for us to sit through, and you sit through it and you're like, this is good information, but then
Mhm.
there's no way to apply it,
Right.
right? And you kind of, it just sits, it kind of sits there, right? And but it's not relatable, it doesn't really work, for you right now. Maybe it will in the future, you don't know. And so when you think about leadership development and making sure that it fits for you, that's super important.
Yes. And actually, I'm so curious for those that are with us, like Nikita.
Hi,
Hello.
Nikita.
Have you been in leadership development programs, and do you feel like they delivered? I want our audience to put in like yes or no, or
Yeah.
comment about that. And part of it is because as we were talking about, like, what are some of those challenges? Because I think when we talk about leadership development, there's almost this like yay but cringe. And one of the stats that I found, which was really interesting, was only 1 in 4 senior managers admits that leadership training is a critical tool for influencing business outcomes.
Ooh. Yeah. Wow.
To me,
Wow.
that just like is mind blowing and shows that like generic leadership training, which you all know how we feel about training, it's not as effective as it needs to be. So this one size fits all that like we're going to jump in and do like, I love Tony Robbins and John Maxwell. Like they are wonderful, but those
Mhm.
general principles, like they don't always make it practical, relatable, blah 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 blah. We're going to
Right.
talk about all that today.
Yeah, especially for technical, right? Technical people.
Yes.
It's funny. I didn't even tell you this, Jill. I had talked with someone really right before we got on here, and she led HR for an organization that was getting into food, and she supported, as an HR professional, she supported food safety.
Hmm.
And I was telling her about what we do at Catalyst and why Catalyst exists and the fact that we focus on technical leadership. And she said, wow, like, in what you're doing is needed, because even in HR, she realizes that technical leaders are one of the most underserved groups when it comes to leadership development. And
Hmm.
a lot of the reasons is because it's generic and you can't apply you just can't apply the way, because the way it's taught, right? Like you can't apply it to the work that we do every day, and to
Yeah.
the types of influence methods, right, that we must use in an organization. And the one thing she said was that, like, technical leaders are in and up and down throughout the organization, and they hold so much, even power and influence in the organization, but they are the most underserved group.
How fascinating on one hand, but yet we know that.
We,
And I love even the key.
yeah,
Thank you for commenting, because I think the other part is so often leadership, because it's generic, it can only touch on the surface.
yeah,
And as we grow in our leadership and mature, like we have, I don't want to say bigger problems. It's like I have kids, right? It's raising kids. Like as they grow, it's not that there's less problems or less to do with them. They change.
yeah,
And the same thing happens as we're leaders. The more
mhm,
tenured we become in our career path, the different things that come up. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about is like how we need to shift that, how it can be shifted, and how we're helping shift that too,
right,
because we want food safety quality leaders to thrive,
yes, yes,
right? This is what we do. We're going to jump in a little early, right? But our goal is for you to thrive in your roles.
yeah,
You are the one that makes the change, that butterfly effects out, and that's food safety culture.
and that's what we do at Catalyst.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nikita, I love your point, and even to think back, imagine if you had have gotten something that was specific to what you do, and to help you grow as a leader in the role that you're in, and in the future roles that you're going to be in, because of your career path, right, and your technical background. Like, that impact would have been so much greater, even
Yeah.
as a young professional.
Yeah. And and companies invest a lot,
Hmm.
right? Because they feel like it's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And so let's see, 2019, almost $170 billion just in North America alone were spent on a leadership training. 170 billion. It's
That
incredible.
that is incredible when you think about the first stat that you read, saying that only 1 in 4 senior managers admits that leadership training is even a critical tool.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to add to that, Deloitte, a study report published by Deloitte says 41% of business leaders believe that their organizations fail to meet the needed leadership standards.
Oh,
Almost half of leaders don't really seem to fulfill what organizations are looking for.
wow. After spending billions of dollars.
170 billion just in North America. I think it was like 300 some billion, 370 billion globally.
that's, that's it's one of those things that, like, these numbers are like, oh my goodness, like, you would not expect. Can you imagine that return on investment? You're spending,
If it was done right.
I mean, really, truly, like, what type of organizations would we have? How many less recalls would we see? How much impact from a well-being would your teams have? How much more fun would it be to go to work, right? And enjoy the people you're around, and enjoy the work that you're doing. The
Mhm.
fact that you're growing in that growth, right, is joy within itself. Imagine if you could go into work and you're happy to be there, and literally you have joy going into work. Like, I mean, to some, that's unbelievable. You don't think you're going to get there.
Yeah. Well, and once again, if we relate it back to food safety, just think about how much easier it is as an organization when you're all working off the same policy and standards,
Hmm.
right? You have a common language. You don't have to worry about like, oh, well, we're going to use this HACCP risk assessment, or we're going to use this food safety. Like, no, we all have
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
right? Like now we can actually make some progress.
Hmm.
Same thing for leadership.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that there aren't slight differences in the things that we do or how we do that, but the core parts, right? They're the
Yeah.
same. We grow together, but we have to do that to build
Yeah.
food safety leaders that are really going to help carry us forward with food safety culture.
And when you think about moving and shifting food safety culture, and we've talked about it on here, we've talked about it in other talks that we've done, is that we can't continue to use the same tools that we've been using. We can't continue to
Yeah.
spend $370 billion globally on something that's just not working for us. We have to think about how we're building the leaders of tomorrow, right?
Mhm.
And how we're getting that 41% down, right? That maybe in the next few years, only 10% of business leaders feel like that they fail to meet leadership standards. And when we get there, right? Like, can you imagine food safety? Like just looking in our industry, right? Just looking at food safety, because we're on Real Talk Food Safety. You know, if we're just looking here, can you imagine that input, like that, like the output, really, of what happens if our leadership development was effective?
Yeah, and I think it's like you said, it's we're underserved and overlooked, but
Mm,
developing professionals in food safety isn't just about the technical skills.
no, no.
Like otherwise, you're just a HACCP coordinator. You're a HACCP coordinator. You're a HACCP expert. That's all great. We need that too, but we also need leaders who are helping move those things, drive those things, collaborate better, uncover the things that we know are out there that we need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, if you're new here, we've talked a lot about what we do at Catalyst. I'm Tia, this is Jill. So welcome to the Real Talk Food Safety. Welcome to Catalyst Space. And we are super passionate about this. Like, this is like one of our core topics that if you've been here, you've heard us talk about, because it's really like our, it's almost like our North Star, or like it's
Very
the
much. It's
reason
our
why
mission.
it's our mission. Yeah.
It is our
The reason
mission.
why we're here. So we're excited about, digging in. And so to start this conversation, right? Like, we all know developing people internally is key, right?
Yeah.
Like, they know the culture, they are already in your system, they work together, they're ready to be developed. So it really is a wise decision to start with developing the people that you have.
Yeah. And I think it's important because, let's be real. Training, coaching, programs, they all cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But it costs more to hire people at
Mm-hmm.
manager levels who don't fit your company culture. And then what happens? They leave or they're
Mm-hmm.
not as effective. And it doesn't mean, I want to make sure I'm clear, it doesn't mean that having new ideas, new people, new perspectives come in, that's completely valuable.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
think sometimes we lose sight that we have people internally that can and are willing to move and step up into different spots
Yeah.
if we give them the opportunities.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's a dance. It's understanding where your culture is and where you want it to go. And even if you need to bring external people in, right? Which sometimes you need to do that.
Yes.
But the majority of the people that's going to be there is going to be people that's already there. So even if you bring in a new manager, even if you bring in new support staff, right? Maybe it's not a new manager, maybe it's new support staff. At the end of the day, the majority of the people that are going to be there during your shift, your culture shift, are going to be people that's already there. So you must focus on your internal people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's why having an intentional program that's specific and focused leadership skills for food safety leaders is so important.
Mhm.
And, since I was digging up stats,
Yeah.
there was a report that came from, I think it's Lacerenza, and they said that a well-planned program contributes to the improvement of everybody's cognitive, effective, and skill-based leadership that trickles up to upper management, leading up, and
Mhm.
down to your organization as well. So
Mm.
when we do this well-planned program and food safety quality, we're often kind of in this middle manager section
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
influencers. But when we do it right with a well-planned program, it helps us up,
Hmm.
across, down,
Yeah.
all across.
I to me, this makes sense, right? Like, we see it
We
in
know.
other ways, right? Like, we see it in strategy, we see it in other plans, right? Like, think about like your preventative maintenance plan, right? Like, if you're just going through and like reacting and, oh, this might break today, let's do this, or this is breaking, let's do this. If it's not well planned out, you're going to see a lot of failures, right? And it's not going to run well. The machine is going to break down. You're not going to be able to keep going. That's the same thing with leadership development, If you do not have that well-planned program, it's one of the reasons why Catalyst has a crafted curriculum, right? And a path for leaders. And it's not meant to be done on its own, right?
Yeah.
It's really meant to be incorporated into the way your leaders grow, over time, and the experience they're getting over time, and how they're leading team and what teams they're leading over
Yeah.
time, because that's when you start to see those true culture shifts.
Yeah. So I think we should dive in.
Yes, yes.
So it's broken it into, oh,
I
yeah.
do want to mention Nikita's comment on like how much money is spent
Oh,
on
sorry. I
personality
need to look over
assessments,
here.
and counting towards leadership development. I'm sure they're counted, right? Which is really interesting, because how many times do you do an assessment, whether it's Myers-Briggs or Strength Finder? And I love Strength Finder. I love all of these personality assessments and leadership assessments, right? But one of the ones that really stick in my mind, that have been impactful to me and impactful to others in times when it's not, is when it's not just a one-off, right? Like if you're just taking an assessment, right, and no one says anything else about it afterwards, or you don't change the way you do work, or it's not incorporated or integrated into the way you do business, then again, it's just a
What's the point?
training, it's just an assessment. It's not that well planned program.
Oh, it's not. So that's going to fall right into the things that we're going to talk about today. So,
So we
yeah,
have
we
three reasons,
narrow
right?
it down to 3 things.
Yes,
So
yes,
go ahead.
yes. So three reasons. I know we're super excited about this. And the first one is something that we've touched on a little bit, but we're going to dive into a little bit more. Is that number one, the 3 reasons why one size does not fit all and what to do about it, right? Number one, it's not relatable.
Yeah.
You're not able to relate it to the work that you are currently doing or work that you see yourself doing in the future.
Yeah. And to be clear, leadership principles don't change. They're like math equations, right? There's they're formulas, and we insert things to see and get different outcomes.
Yeah.
So the principles aren't bad. It's just, how do we use them to get the outcomes that we want? So whether or not we're using conflict from over here or conflict from over there, conflict resolution, if we aren't bringing it back to, like, what does that mean when we're in the food industry?
Yeah.
What type of things do we experience conflict with that no other people have ever had to experience conflict about?
Right. Yeah.
A lot.
A lot. A
I
lot.
mean, I'm going to just start because today I was reading something about regulations. Regulatory HACCP, real HACCP.
Yeah,
People in other leadership programs will never understand this concept.
True. That is so true. Just like writing programs, right? It's like life and then regulatory life, right? And we have to marry the two in our organization. And not many functions understand that. Not many industries understand that.
No. And that's, I think, a great program when we talk about being relatable. Leadership programs that don't lean into what actually is happening for the people that are part of the program, it's just not going to, like, sit home. Like, it doesn't mean that you won't pick up parts, but there's still so much. It's like a gold mine that's left undiscovered.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, being in an organization that did value development, I've sat through many, leadership development, which, a little asterisk, it happens when I became a manager of people. There's things that I could have, taken into account earlier on. But once you become a manager of people, then you get put into these leadership development. And then I sat through these, things with my operations counterpart. And, it's really built for them. Yeah. And so they're able to take things and really start to practice those. But I have to almost do like mind gymnastics around like, okay, that's interesting. Well, I can't really write someone up if they don't do their HACCP checks because they don't report directly to me. I can't write up their manager. There's no one for me to write up because they don't report directly to me.
You've not been given that authority.
I have not been given that authority. And I do not have that authority. It's impossible. So I have to influence a little bit differently, right? Like I can't hold someone accountable, which if you are interested in accountability, check out our last week, Real Talk. But I can't hold them accountable in the same way as my operations manager can. And so, like, I mean, and I noticed that early on like, okay, how am I going to make this relatable to me? And I really do have to do this mind gymnastics to get there. Well, we've already done that mind gymnastics for you for
Mhm.
Catalyst, right? Because our job is to make it relatable to you in the work that you're doing.
Yes, whether it's in our modules or whether it's in our group sessions, like
Hmm.
those elements are always there because it's the community of people in food,
Hmm. Exactly.
regardless.
Exactly.
And I think the other part about generic concepts, and here Deloitte once again said that leadership training and programs should really contextualize business success as a means of alleviating a particular social concern or an act with greater moral value. So,
Mm-hmm.
as leaders, isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're
Yeah.
supposed to help the North Star. Like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Here's where we go. So, we talk about food safety culture. hmm
That's it.
I think that's a pretty greater moral value, like what we're doing and how we need to be doing it.
Yeah. And when you leave, a training for us, it's really a part of our coaching program. When you leave that program, you should have action steps on what should I do next. Now that I have these leadership principles, right? What should I do next?
Yeah.
For it. And I think that's a part of that food safety culture, right? On like you should be able to really contextualize, right, is the word that Deloitte used, or visualize and be able to even write down what does business success look like
hmm
for my team, for the organization, for my counterparts, if I was able to take these leadership concepts and execute them well.
Yeah. And that even plays into the one about just having clarity. Like
Hmm.
the program needs to be clear on what will happen, what you'll get out of it.
Hmm.
It needs to have transferable skills. It needs to, have the right resources and tools to help you move forward in your leadership.
Hmm. Hmm. And if it
Otherwise,
does,
it just creates a little bit of chaos because you're
right,
going
exactly.
down, this left field track and others are over here.
Yeah. But, it really fails. It really fails what the business is looking to do, right? Like you now have these thoughts in your head, like you said, but it's chaos. And you're not able to really make action steps from it and
Yeah.
do something different. We like to use an example from one of our boot campers that's currently in our program, and he called out that he's in two leadership programs, ours and in another one, and he said, I love coming to this one because we're his people.
hmm
He's here with people that are like him, that's working on similar things, that have similar issues, and he's able to have different conversations around it, and the topics are more relatable to what he's doing. And of course we love hearing that because it validates the work that we're doing, but we know that because we've literally been in his shoes. We've been in his shoes where we're sitting through a leadership program, and again, they're great principles to know, right? But they're not relatable. We can't take everything from that class and change the way that we do work or help improve our team because it's just not relatable.
Yeah. And I think the other part with that, because of our coaching background and the programs that we've gone through and the years that we've spent like pure coaching,
Yeah.
we know that our role is also to help facilitate new perspectives and possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we're in a community where some people may go, well, gosh, you're so like-minded. What will you learn? Ah, good point. But that's why it's a diverse group from different sectors of the industry in different roles. Everybody looks different, does different, is different. And
Yeah.
our role as coaches is to help people lean into that so that collectively we learn more to apply it so it's relatable.
Mm-hmm. This is I'm like, this is the reason why it's coaching based, right?
Yeah,
The reason
right.
why we feel leadership development should be coaching based, because that's how you really help people facilitate those conversations and really help people discover their solutions within themselves.
Yeah. Which is actually, I didn't even plan this, but it's a perfect segue for the second reason why generic leadership, one size doesn't fit all, doesn't work.
Hmm.
It's because generic leadership is not inclusive.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, even
And
my example that I gave, right? Like, I didn't get this leadership training until I became a manager of people, right? So, like, by that time, I'm already kind of messing up my team, you know? If I didn't have,
been there, done that too.
right? I'm kind of already messing them up before, I get some tools to be able to get them there.
Right. Like we're supposed to prepare people to have success, which means preparing them for what they're going to encounter. And
Yeah.
too often, right, we've seen that like leadership training is just for, I'm going to say, kind of the rising stars and for people who are already in the leader roles.
Mhm,
And yes, they also need to continue developing leadership
mhm.
skills, just like we talked about earlier with Nikita's comment.
Yeah.
But it's also leadership is not just for people who need improvement or have had problems.
Yes.
Like we
Yes.
kind of do these tail ends, and y'all know
Mhm.
the standard curve. Like
Right.
there's this whole segment of people in the middle that are not being served.
Yeah. Same with coaching, right? Same with coaching. You either get a coach for executive coaching because now you're in this role, or you get a coach because you're, you're basically at this point that they're like, you need to do something, or
We're
you
coaching
might
you
not
up or coaching you out.
work. Right. Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. When in reality, there's this group of people that as organizations, we have to continue to foster because eventually those people will be leaders, right? Or they will be someone that you might need to manage out of the organization if you
Yes.
don't give them the tools that they need right now to become that leader.
Right. And okay, this is just the basic laws of like math, right? If I have one person that I try to make 10% better, yay. What if I have 100 people I try to make just 2% better?
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, my improvement gets bigger
Yeah.
as I am more inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is one of the things that has to change when it comes to food safety culture. Like if
Mhm.
we're not developing our people, like if we're not doing that, and I'm like looking at all of you out there, right? Like if you are not developing your people on an ongoing basis with a well developed program,
Yeah.
food safety culture, what you want it to be is like way down the road for you because it's like that is the tool that needs to change, right? Like we have to start putting time and apparently the right money in the right place
Mhm.
where we start seeing this movement in leadership because people in food safety, and this is what makes it heavy for us in food safety, is that we're trying to literally turn one of the biggest, oldest boats that's out there. Literally, that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to do it with limited resources, with no money, with the, oh, well, we need cases out the door and all this other stuff, right? Like we're trying to turn this massive, old, rickety, rusty ship around. And if we're not giving our people the tools to do that, like we're just pushing against a
We
wall.
we are. And I think about this organization, this plant that I had gone to that were struggling to get people even internally to apply for like QA tech, QA supervisor type roles.
Yeah.
You know why? Because it was too hard. It wasn't worth it.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where we talk about how we have to prepare people to have success. We
Hmm.
need to be the advocates for people to be like, food safety is fun.
Yes.
But it also takes us stepping up and going, it's our responsibility to make sure you have the tools to be in
Hmm.
this role.
Hmm. Yeah. And the worst thing, which I mean, like, if you're listening, like, raise a hand if you've ever felt this way, where as a food safety
Let's put it
professional,
up to start.
right? Because as a food, what I'm going to say is going to be true for you, right? As a food safety professional, and to watch other people around you getting the tools and the
Yeah.
development that they need, right? But you are not getting the tools and development that you need. Like, how demotivating is that? Right? Like,
Yeah.
that is not inclusive at all. How demotivating it is where you're we're one of the only few functions that's on call 24/7. And like my phone goes off at 2 a.m. every morning because I'm covering all three shifts. And, and, right? But still, you watch your counterparts go to training that is specific for them, and they're getting the right tools for them, right? And maybe we're tacked on like, oh yeah, you manage people too. Come on, you can come on
Hey,
in.
just show up. We have somebody coming to the, facility anyways.
Right, exactly. Come on in. And then you get in there and say and think like, okay, this is not relatable to what I'm doing anyway. Or you're in there like, if you guys just did this, we'll have the food safety culture that we want, like it's also that, right?
But that's all the inclusive and well-planned programs, right?
Yeah.
And, I think the other part to go along with that is often like just right, we get comfortable in roles. We get comfortable in how we lead. We get comfortable in what we're doing. That's cool. But even when I thought like, oh, I'm a pretty good leader right now. Holy smokes, did I have so much more to learn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So regardless if I am actively needing to improve those skills or if I bring those naturally, because I know, like Tia, you're a different style leader than I am, and I had to build confidence to get there, and you kind of had it a little bit more natural.
Yeah.
So, do you think you still would have liked or could benefit from having better leadership development support?
100%. 100%. Like I even gave some examples today, but like even if you feel like you naturally have these qualities, and maybe even sometimes even as a leader, right? As a leader, and you identify someone on your team like, oh, they are a natural leader. People naturally gravitate to them, or within this culture, right? Like there's some cultures that I'm not a good fit in, but within this culture, it seems like yes, they can influence, they can, get people around them, they can push forward towards a goal. But if you don't really have that ongoing development, you burn out, right? Like you burn out because you really don't have the right tools and the right resources to continue that long term.
Right.
So yes, my answer is I'm raising my hand.
Well, yeah. And, okay, and here, I'm all about stats today. A 2018 Global Leadership Forecast had a report that said organizations that have a more inclusive approach to leadership training were 4.2 times more likely to financially outperform those that maintain development within the confines of just their management sphere.
Wow, 4.2 times. That's
4.2.
significant.
And another company said that companies that did that had a 25% increase in organizational outcomes.
Can you imagine if you can get a 25% increase in the output and the outcomes?
And that translates to 4 times more likely to financially outperform your competitors. Or not even outperform them, but more than where you were at.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And that's because once again, we focus on leadership. It's not inclusive. It's focusing on high performers or executives, and then people who, right, they're coaching up or coaching out. This big swath in the middle managers, supervisors, directors, like all are the ones contributing to this 25% increase in better outcomes when they get the right leadership development.
That is big. Huge. I mean, like just right now, think about what you would do if you could get an increase in 25% in your output.
Wow.
That ship is starting to move a little bit more, right?
Yes.
Now,
sorry,
the comment that came in.
I know. I have to scroll down so I can read those.
So it seems like, in the 90s, you were at a company that had a food safety committee. And as a company-wide requirement that everyone was hired or people seeking leadership positions later, and each person was required to be taught how to audit the facility, processes, and ingredients. And team members were rotated every 6 to 12 months, and those who audited had to teach. Okay. Companies no longer approve spending for this, no longer spend for training, and boards no longer approve the money. right? In fact, many facilities eliminated it. Okay. And food safety and leadership has to be as fluid as possible to manage continuing production. Yeah. So in this particular case, it seems like that everyone was getting that development, right? They had that rotation. They got this development to understand like how to
The
audit, how
organization. Yeah.
all of those things. And then now it's cut, right? But you are still required, right, to manage continuous production. Like I'm really curious. Like, let me know, like, did you notice, which obviously you did because you're adding this comment, but did you notice how outputs, right, decreased?
Mm.
And how people felt like they were overworked and felt like that, they weren't as supported as before, right? Like we've been there too. You're at an organization and you come in and you have this great development and then things get cut. Oh, we can't do this development this year. We might have to look at it next year. And before you know it, it's been 3 years since you've gotten the development. You
Yeah.
feel that.
We feel it.
You feel that. You not just feel it within yourself, you see it in your team.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And imagine this person that's writing, the story on really, it's like if I'm trying to change food safety culture and we now no longer have this key component of it. I mean, again, you're trying to turn this ship that's just not moving.
Yeah. And it makes me think about Tia. Maybe we hosted in Q1 Real Talk Food Safety Live on Zoom. Maybe the next one, I like to throw random ideas out. Maybe it should be like how to build the business case to bring the right, programs back in. Right? Because there are definitely ways to do it. And I think in food safety and quality, at least for me, I always got stuck on one track. And like I think we know more now, right?
Yeah.
When we know more, we do more. And I think there's different ways that we can help even with people thinking about, once again, new perspective, new possibilities, because we know that this is such a critical part of food safety culture.
Yeah.
It's about, even for individuals, right? Like feeling valued and really being able to step into our purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And I could go off all left field on that, but I know we have one more reason we want to share about why generic leadership programs aren't as effective.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for sharing your story because I mean so impactful. And yeah, I see that you were in R&D. Like that just shows, right? Like this technical background, like we need those development opportunities.
Yes, because we're constantly interacting, we're constantly influencing, we're constantly collaborating.
Right. Yeah.
Not that they don't see those in other areas. Let me just go back to regulatory versus real HACCP. That's real. And it still is to this day.
Exactly. Exactly. So the third reason, and we've been talking about this, is that it's not well planned.
Yeah.
Right. This is the reason why it's not working. It is not well planned. It might be one off. Like have you all ever had that manager where you're like, I need development, right? And they're just go and
pick something.
Go and pick something, right? I've been thinking about doing, an assessment, even to think about like when Nikita was talking about an assessment. Oh yeah, just go and do something. Oh, people I think have done this before, or that before. You should choose one of those and do it. That's how you end up wasting those billions of dollars, is because all of those things are great, right? Like those are great tools. But if they're not built into a strategy at your organization, you're not going to see the output from that. You're not going to see that 25% movement, right? Because it's not built into any strategy.
Yeah. And so even part of that is, I mean, you've probably all been part of this, but I remember like one year we had a flow of, like conflict resolution because we were, problems that flared up in the organization. So we all went through, the mandatory class, and then we all continued life as normal.
Yep.
We thought, wow, this is really interesting. And we went back to behaving the way that we did prior to the training, but it was a checkbox.
Exactly. Check. Got it. Right.
Yep. We provided however X number of minutes of conflict training to our team members, and however that played out for the organization, hooray for them. But it didn't help us be better team members and employees.
No, it doesn't. And as a matter of fact, if you're doing something like that, you might actually be creating a space that is that is not, when you think about psychological safety,
Mm.
that doesn't have it, because
Yeah.
you're also telling your people, hey, you've gone through this training with conflict, don't bring up conflict when it comes, because hey, you've done that training. And when in reality, you want an environment that is safe and that people are able to come when there is conflict and they're able to talk through it and have the right tools to dissolve conflict, right? And to have healthy conflict. And so it's actually counterproductive. And the reason why, again, teams outperform when they have specific leadership development, because the ones that are not specific and generic and you're doing it as a checkbox, they're all sitting quiet and they're not engaged.
Yeah.
And they're hating coming into work and they're not being a part of the team. Because yep, I did that checkbox, versus a group that's engaged, that's having conversations, that's talking about conflict in a way that's relatable, that fits into the broader picture of what your food safety culture should look like. Then it becomes more like, oh, yes, I need to bring this up because I now know what my vision of food safety culture looks like. I now know how this fits into the bigger picture of our culture.
Yeah. And I think how often do we have, thank you for sharing that too, because I think that's a big part. And I also think, how often do we hear people and organizations say, oh my gosh, we're having a retention problem. We can't find people.
Yes.
There's people. There are tons of people. But the problem, part of that problem is, if I have a company where I don't see where I'm going, I don't see that there's a path. I don't see that they're truly investing in people.
Yeah.
We need more than the lip service of, oh, well, of course we invest in people. Like, how do you invest in people? Show me a path that you have given for somebody in my role or this role you're looking at or other roles.
Right. Yeah.
That's really hard for a lot of organizations to provide.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about coming to an organization, right, we're willing to invest our time, our blood, sweat, tears. We know it's coming if you're in food safety.
True.
Are they willing to invest in us?
Yeah. Right.
And even all the chatter, and it's not that this is the show for it, but even about like new generations coming in where they're like, they don't want to work, they don't want to stay. Well, give them a reason to.
Yeah.
That's part of what we do, to say, hey, let's talk about what this could look like.
Yeah.
But when we are using generic leadership or no leadership, there isn't a plan. And that's why having something that's well planned would be easy to show people, to go, hey, when you come on with us, here's the plan that we send people in technical roles through.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, game changer.
It really is. And we see it, right? Like we see it because we've been there, and you see it because you've been there, right? Imagine if your organization can give that to you. And even to think about, like, when you think about something that's well planned or something that's not a one size fit all, how is that development changing as you grow? Right. Yeah. Again, that's one of the reasons why we made a curriculum. And it's one of the reasons why, like, after boot camp, you have to show change in your leadership, right? Like, you have to be ready for the next step of our leadership development, because we're meeting you where you are. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. We're gonna get you there. And the type of development that I'm gonna need right now versus the type of development that I may need in the next 6 months, right? Or when I do get a team, right? Or whatever those different situations are, that development looks different, and it should change and grow and add as you change, grow, and add, either throughout your career, or even people that start in our program that's already at a director level, right? They're building off of what they're doing, right? They're building off of, like, okay, their team, where they are now, and how they can better their team and be a better leader for their team.
And I think that's the other part, is that there's always this ongoing opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And so when we create the space where people have the opportunity to really stand in there, doesn't mean like 5 hours a day, but when we're so busy and we don't even take time to reflect. Leadership takes time to be reflective, to really evaluate, like, where have I been? What have I done? How have I contributed? All these questions that we really don't typically ask ourselves because we're busy moving around.
Mhm.
And so creating that space to become a better leader is super important.
It really
And I
is.
and I think sometimes too, as food safety professionals, we're like, "Oh, well, we'll get to that eventually." And sometimes even, once again, who's an advocate for you to stay the course?
Yeah.
That's where, even like Tia, you talked earlier about the person like that had been the background in HR.
Yeah.
Like, they are committed to
Mm,
helping develop people because they too get frustrated with turnover and not being able to find people.
yeah.
So don't think you have to do it alone. Like, there
Yeah.
are advocates within your organization that will go, yes, we actually need a well planned program so that we can keep people, develop people,
Mhm.
have better engagement.
Right,
Get
exactly.
the food safety culture that we're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One point that you said around like reflection as a leader. And, earlier we kind of talked about like some natural qualities that I have when I think about my leadership style and things that just fit. A piece of that is taking time out to reflect
Mhm.
because you do think about the decisions you've made, what you would do differently, what you're working on, right? And I would say, one of the things that I worked on, and I'm sure I've said it on Real Talk as well as in our classes, um, in our sessions. But one thing that I worked on is, okay, if I'm giving someone a task, I want to be clear about it,
Mhm.
about what is important and allow them to create themselves without it looking exactly the way Tia wants it to look.
Yeah.
So I was really trying to take a step back as a leader so that my team can thrive. And I remember sharing that with my team on like, this is what I'm practicing. And in order for me to come up with that and reflect on each situation that I've had, what did I do well? What did I not do well? Like, I had to build in that reflection time. And that's why I love what we do and why we keep group sessions, is because that gives you that time to
Mhm.
on what are you doing as a leader? How do you make different changes in the future? What do you keep, right? That's going extremely well with your team. And if you're not taking that time to reflect, right, you're missing something.
Yeah, and I love that because leadership is intentional.
Mhm.
It's not something that you do on the side or it's your part-time gig or you do it after all your other tasks are done. It's intentional.
Yeah.
And it happens in the little moments. So it's the moments that, right, that you could take that moment to listen, to ask, to clarify. It's not standing in front of the room and like presenting. Like, that's a
Right.
form, but the leadership that we're talking about are the ones where we're really being mindful of our team's well-being. We are thriving in our roles because we're understanding how, how when we're a stronger leader, we also are taking care of ourselves with boundaries and expectations and clarity and all of those parts. That's why well-planned programs for development are so important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just adding another thing to your already over full
Mhm.
plate, and that's not going to help.
Yeah. Which is 100% true. And like that's why your organization's hired you, right? Like they hired you to do all the other stuff, but they also hired you to take care of your people and to be a
Mhm.
great leader and to help provide the organization with tools so that they can move that ship,
Yeah,
right? Like that's a part of our roles.
it is.
And it's our job to figure out how to get it, whether we can create it ourselves or you're working with a partner like Catalyst.
And you all know I love workload capacity because I talk about it. I probably like at least once a month on this show.
It's important though. It is
The most
important.
underused tool,
It's true.
even though we're so busy.
Mhm.
So, workload capacity. Say it again.
Yes. It's true. You know what? And this might be a little bit of a tangent, but like people do it when they're in trouble, right? Like I remember really one of the first times that I did a workload capacity and use that as a tool was when I was trying to convince my leadership team to give me more staff, right? And because I was overworked. And so then I go and fill it out. But imagine if I already had that tool, right? I probably would have found myself not in an overworked situation because I would have already communicated this is the capacity that I have. These are all the tasks we need to prioritize because I can't work 80 hours a week, right? Um,
Right?
So it's like if I had have used that tool ahead of time, and this is what we talk about with our boot campers, right? Is that if you're not like use that tool to have those conversations before you're burnt out.
Yeah, and I know we're on a tangent, but I had a quality manager who massively embraced it. So even when the facility would be like, "Hey, we need quality to do this other check," they were like, "That's fine." They would put it in the little the format, the template that actually very much similar to what we use to be like, "Okay, well then we're going to have X amount of overtime, or we're going to do this, or
Mhm.
are you willing to contribute that much more?"
Yeah.
It made the conversation different. It wasn't
Yes.
about being busy. It was about, okay, well, how do we shift? Where do we get resources?
Mhm. Yeah.
So much easier
It's true.
without, while we could stay committed to having manageable workloads for our team.
Yes, yes. And it shows your worth too, right? Like
Mhm.
as a food safety and quality team, I think one of the things we forget is exactly what we're adding back to the organization. And being able to do that work of the workload capacity and using it, right? The way that your manager used it, using that as a tool to make decisions shows the organization, hey, like this is the value this team is bringing. And when we're not well staffed, or when we're adding projects, but we're not necessarily adding resources to the team, then this is what happens. And to have that conversation, to be able to use these tools, right? That takes leadership. That takes leadership. That's the reason why it's a part of our leadership development process, right? It takes leadership to have those conversations, and it takes specific leadership, right, to have the conversations in food within a technical role in food safety, which ties
Mhm.
it all back to why one size leadership development does not work. It does not work, right? Because it's you can't have that conversation. You can't have those tools, you can't have, those resources of workload capacity if you're not talking about it in your leadership development,
Exactly.
right?
I love the wrap up. Well, and here's the other part. People are like, yes, we know. Yes, this makes sense. How do we do it?
Hmm.
Well, sometimes the first step is the first step.
Yeah.
And, I will shamelessly let everybody know because T and I just decided yesterday that May Boot Camp starts May 25th.
Yes. Yes.
It's a great opportunity to be like, okay, let's start this journey.
Hmm.
We also have a lot of food safety people who are like, here, talk to our HR teams.
Yeah,
Guess what? We are advocates for you.
we are.
So when you're thinking, how do I help make this move? We're here to help with
Mhm.
that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And this is really the first step of your well developed plan, right? It's that first step of, okay, we need to do something different. We need to use a different tool to move this food safety culture ship, right? Like we need to be able to move it some. And that means that we need different tools. And boot camp is made for that. It was created because we needed different tools. And I know, Jill, you are probably putting in
I
our
am the
preview.
preview.
Yes, she's putting
And
in a link for our preview where you get to experience our first module.
and for first module, sorry, I can't type and do everything at once, right? First module is all about mindset because it really takes you to be like, I deserve this, I'm worthy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
ready to do something different. So the first one is all about that.
Yeah.
So I'm putting it in here, the preview link, and then to use coupon code preview. But
Mm-hmm.
check it out.
Yeah. And we're
Get a sense
open.
of what it's like because we're also one of the only, because we're coaching based, right? We are very introspective.
We are.
We are here to help you step into your power
Mm-hmm.
so that you are really using your gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's at work, whether it's at home, but that's what it's about,
Yeah.
right?
That's exactly what
And a
it's
lot of
about.
that is mindset on like where we are and kind of where we're feeling
Yes.
things. So
Yes. So if you are following us out there, you will see that boot camp is open for May. We are open to take
mhm,
people, and
yeah.
class fills up. So we like to keep the class small because we have group sessions and we have conversations. And so join us, get your spot, don't let it close because we are excited about starting on May 25th.
We are. Absolutely. Step one of your well planned program.
There we go.
Yes. All right. And we're going to be back here next Wednesday.
Yes.
And we have the amazing Dr. Yvonne Masters on with us
Yes.
next week.
Yes, we're super excited to have her on the show because she is I mean, if you don't know her, like you will. You will know her. And she
And
is
you'll know why we're all like, yay, that she's coming on.
exactly. I mean, she just has this rich background and she is making moves in the industry. And we are so excited for her to be a part of our show and for us and you to learn from her and hear her perspective.
Absolutely.
We're excited about that one.
We are. We're equally as excited that you are joining us every week. And if you're new, that you joined us this week, or if you're watching the replay, that you took the time.
Mhm.
We very much appreciate that you spend this time because we know you are busy. But it also shows us that you're curious about how to do things different. And
Yeah.
so thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining and for taking this first step, right? To do something different. We
Mhm.
look forward to hearing what you thought about the module. And we look forward to having you in boot camp in May.
Yes. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone. Bye bye.